I'm not much of a horror movie guy. The most I can handle on a good day is Independence Day. Any mentions of clowns or FNAF and I'm gone. But I can tell you that the scariest part of coding a clown into Terraria was the 12 hours it took me to code this stupid, freaking ugly, stupid, idiotic... It all began with a poll. I set up 4 main options with the hopes that something like the Emerald Blade or Jerry would win, as those would be super easy. But no. Of course, the option with the potential boss fight is the one that won by over 20%. If you didn't know, Bonzo was the first boss in Skyblock's dungeon system. He was a clown that would run around, shoot balloons, spawn mobs, die, and then shoot even more balloons. I began coding Bonzo by pretending that he was just a regular enemy. That was simple enough, give him a name, some sound, and a default AI. Then I just had to code his attacks. After a little bit, I had some basic code that I wanted to test, but then I realized that in order for Terraria to even run it, I needed a matching complete set of sprites. Now, NPC sprites are not very easy to make. They're arguably a little easier than armor set sprites because, I mean, come on, what even is this? But they still suck, and especially when you consider that it's me drawing them, you can't really expect much. So instead I just took the guide as a temporary sprite. We'll get a real sprite later. So now I had a very primitive version of Bonzo that shot arrows like a laser beam. Just not at me, and that was the problem. Bonzo had to be able to actually shoot them at me. However, since I was creating my own projectiles instead of using Bonzo's default targeting AI, I would have to tell Bonzo where to shoot. This stumped me, so I looked at some YouTube comments to cheer me up. Do you use chatgpt to help you write code? What? chatgpt. I usually like to intro things that I talk about, but I don't even think chatgpt needs an intro. Immediately, curious if this would work, I asked it for help, and boy did it deliver. I was shocked that ChatGPT knew such a niche as Terraria modding, but it did, and solved my problem. I also asked it how to get a boss bar, but in this regard it failed, as it tried to actively draw one with, like, red pixels. Instead I asked one of my programmer friends I befriended after my previous videos. Now Bonzo has a boss bar. Then I decided I was going to do it. I was going to make a Bonzo sprite. I spent about 3 hours sitting there recoloring the guide, only to realize it looks worse than something my 8-year-old brother could have drawn. Then I realized I also had to draw the staff on him as well. Fortunately, another of my programmer friends came to the rescue by telling me that I could just make the staff separately and draw that sprite on top with some code. So, curious of how far ChatGPT could go, I asked it for a sprite. Except, ChatGPT doesn't do that. So instead, I looked for some AI that could, and after realizing all the good ones were paid, I decided I'd just make it myself. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Why would you make the staff yourself? Have you even looked at the Bonzo sprite you just made? And that was exactly what was running through my mind as well. So instead, I paid $11 for a Discord bot that does AI imaging. If that doesn't deserve a sub, I don't know what does. After messing around for a bit, I realized this bot is kind of stupid. I mean, don't get me wrong, it makes awesome art, but I inputted orange pixel art, #pixel art, of weapon staff with very few pixels, looking very pixelated, with only the weapon, so do not have any people or anything, and it's a sprite for a weapon. The staff is for the video game Terraria, so it should look very pixelated. And it gave me this, which, yeah, looks interesting, but it's not pixel art, and why is there a clown? Anyways, after a while, I got a sprite I was somewhat satisfied with. The problem is, too many pixels. So, into Photoshop I went, and after a little while, I got a somewhat pixelated staff that I thought looked pretty cool. Back to figuring out how to draw Bonzo, which, after getting some programming help, I actually did. Although, in order to do this, I had to first make a Bonzo staff file. So I put a pause on the Bonzo boss coding and made the Bonzo staff, which for now just shot happy bombs, because they're close enough to balloons and I was too lazy to code my own projectile. For now. Although, right now the balloons were a little too happy and just killed me. Instantly. However, after a little bit of adjusting, the Bonzo staff was basically kinda mostly working. Ish. Now a little bit of draw code and bam, Bonzo's got a staff. Let's get back to his aiming. Now he shoots a laser beam with happy bombs straight to the player. Isn't he just so warm and fuzzy and nice? I then entered the trial and error phase, going through cycles of finding a problem, asking a friend for help, and testing. I did too many cycles of this to put them all in the video, and to be frank, I really don't remember a lot of them. Take this recording, for example, in which Bonzo is rapidly enlarging and shrinking. I have no clue how or why I did this, but, you know, at some point I did. I then decided that Bonzo was basically done, and that it was time for a test run. So I gave myself some post-Skeletron gear and summoned this ugly clown. However, I quickly ran into a problem. See, happy bombs are actually a hard mode projectile shot by clowns, and they deal around 150 damage every hit. Which may or may not be the same amount of damage as the wall of flesh in expert mode. So I realized that I had to do the one thing that I'd been pushing off this entire project. Make a custom projectile. Not only would it be easier to customize and also be usable in the Bonzo staff, but it would also stay more accurate to Skyblock, where Bonzo shot actual color-changing balloons rather than smiling explosives. First, I needed some sprites. My plan was to make 5 different balloon colors so they could change color and look cool coming from the staff. Also, since they were projectiles, I planned for them to be only 8x8 pixels. Surely I don't need to commission a pixel artist to make a 64-pixel spray, right? Don't worry, this isn't a sarcastic bit where I say, actually guys, I did. I just made them myself. Now, yes, they do look more like colorful squares than balloons, but to be fair, so do Skyblocks. So, with these sprites, I coded the projectiles. They're actually easier than I thought, and after adding a little colored dust, they actually look kinda cool. After doing a little more Bonzo balancing, I began coding the final item, the Bonzo's mask. In Skyblock, the Bonzo's mask prevents the player from death, healing them to full and giving them strength, in exchange for a 6-minute cooldown. The actual stats were easy enough to code, but I did not know how to code the whole prevent the player from death thing, so once again I relied on my programmer friends. Guys, I promise I'm actually coding most of the mod, it's just a few tricky bits that I asked for help on. Okay, maybe more than a few, but still, I try to get my own sprites and stuff when I can. This guy just sent me full remix of my old Monster Hunter set, which are 50 times better than mine, and this guy just sent me a remake of my old Hyperion sprite, which is also 50 times better than mine. Out of pure curiosity, given that I clearly suck at spriting armor, I asked this guy for a Bonzo's mask sprite to see what he could do, and not even 45 minutes later he sent me this masterpiece. I was at a loss for words, so I just took the sprite and threw it with my Bonzo mask code. And after a little bit of configuring, the Bonzo mask is fully functional. Additionally, after adding some explosions to the balloon projectile file, Bonzo and the Bonzo staff are also fully functional. I also made the player able to be damaged by the Bonzo staff explosion, making them take KB, just like in Skyblock. Also, I asked one of the sprite guys from earlier to make me a real Bonzo sprite, so now Bonzo looks like an actual clown, in a good way. Now, I'll admit, the Bonzo fight feels a little different from its Skyblock counterpart, and that might have something to do with the fact that I'm porting a 3D boss fight into 2D, or maybe it's the fact that I don't have a custom arena, but honestly, I still think it's pretty fun and challenging. It's also complete with a full set of drops, including the Bonzo staff, Bonzo mask, and party bullets. Oh, and I almost forgot, we need a summoning item. I figured it should be a clown horn because I think clowns use those. The actual code wasn't too hard, but for the summon, I wanted a custom clown horn sound. So, I downloaded a free one, stretched it and gave it reverb, and threw it in my sounds folder. The final summon looks like this. And isn't that just not terrifying whatsoever? Anyways, now that everything's done, I have a pretty big announcement to make. The Hypixel Skyblock Stuff mod v1.0 is now out on Tmodloader. One small caveat is I don't have the full pet sprites from a previous video back from my friend yet. Earlier he sent me this as the Griffin pet sprite, which, I mean, it is a Griffin, it's just a Peter Griffin. Hopefully he's joking and I'll get the real sprite sometime, but if not, we'll just call it an Easter egg. Either way, they're fully functional, so the mod should be fully playable. Additionally, rather than making a wiki and publishing all the recipes and stats, I've uploaded the code to GitHub so you can view all the recipes, stats, and code yourself. I've tried to polish and comment the code as much as possible to make it understandable, but there's still bound to be a few errors in there. I would also like to credit all of the programmers, sprite artists, and advisors who helped me out in the description. This mod, and especially this Bonzo section of it, would not have been doable whatsoever without them. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and wish you an awesome rest of your day.